Son of Hamas, a gripping account of terror, betrayal, political intrigue, and unthinkable choices. And that's the book authored by Musab Hassan Youssef. It's a book about his turning and becoming Israel's most valuable spy inside Hamas. Certainly the most unlikely spy there. He's here with me in the studio this morning to talk to me about what happened, what transpired. A very good morning to you, Musab. I thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thank you.
What brings you to South Africa, firstly?
I came here on an invitation by the Zionist Federation, and I had a speaking engagement last night for a group of people, and that was the main reason for my visit.
Actually, I think that's where the point is. A Palestinian invited by Zionists to speak, a Palestinian whose father is one of the founding fathers of Hamas. Isn't there an irony for you there?
Well, the Zionist organizations worldwide are open, always for all kind of speakers and opinions. And I was invited and I accepted the invitation. It's that simple.
Let's talk a little bit about what brought you here. It starts around 1999, is that, when you were arrested?
1996.
You were arrested by the Israelis.
Yes.
What happened afterwards?
I was arrested by the Israeli authorities for my involvement and affiliation with the Hamas terrorist organization. And during my time in prison, I was exposed to the true nature of my father's organization. Again, my father is one of the founders of Hamas organization, Sheikh Hassan Youssef, and he's also the top leader of the movement in the West Bank today. Today he's in an Israeli prison. Now, during my time in prison, I discovered the brutality of my father's organization, which was a face that I did not see through my father. And when I started to discover the brutality and the killings and the torture that took place, which we're talking about hundreds of prisoners were tortured and dozens were killed, I started to question the whole business of my father. And I kept on growing of my understanding. And at some point, I did what was possible to stop the killing of innocent people. Let's say on both sides. Yes, it happened that I worked for the Israeli intelligence service. That was not an original plan for me. I never expected or thought that I would work for this kind of agency.
That's where the question is, because you are arrested and you choose to work with Shin Bet as opposed to continue working with Hamas. And your reasoning here is because Hamas is brutal. But what about Shin Bet? Because they were just, and in some people's eyes, are just as brutal.
Well, this is not true. The Israeli intelligence is committed to the Israeli constitution and to the Israeli law. Yes, in a war zone, sometimes there was some assassinations and casualties among civilians, but Israel never targeted
So
civilians.
when it's Shin Bet, it's some assassinations and some casualties. When it's Hamas, it's brutality.
No, it's not some. Show me in any Israeli book, or bring me any evidence that Israel targeted civilians.
It wouldn't be in a book,
as
would
a
it?
target.
But would it be in a book? I don't think so.
It's like just bring me anything from your supervision.
But is there anything from Hamas? Is there anything from Hamas documented that says Hamas deliberately targeted civilians?
Yes, well, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, for example, the spiritual leader of the movement, many times he said, we did not give the military wing of the movement any red lines. And practically, when Hamas targeted people, imagine, you're going on a bus, rushing to your work in the morning, and an organization sent a suicide bomber to blow himself up in that bus, and you put the entire country under that fear. What are the limits? What are the red lines? Hamas crossed all the red lines and targeted children, even like schools, synagogues. They did not leave any area that they did not attack. But when you look at the Israeli retaliation or reaction for Hamas terrorist attacks, you see, as ex-Shin Bet agent, I guarantee you, and I'm responsible for every word that I say here, that every time when we carried an operation, we made sure that civilians won't be involved in that. And when I say mistakes happened, sometimes there was no intelligence on the ground and soldiers acted under maybe fear, or I don't understand the circumstances, which led, to some casualties.
Even today, though, human rights campaigners will talk to you about extrajudicial killings happening in the West Bank, happening in Gaza. And they point to Israeli security agencies and they say they're responsible for those extrajudicial killings and assassinations of political leaders.
Yeah, well, as I said, 10 years we live in the reality, and I knew what we were doing. Our main goal was to save human lives. And I'm honest 100%. Now, people's perceptions of things happening is sometimes totally different than the reality and the truth. People usually, in the Middle East especially, like to blame and export their problems on someone else. It seems that nobody is showing a proper level of responsibility. And if you want to follow just the fables and the lies on the street, you will never find the truth.
You talk about saving human lives. In the past 10 years, what life have you saved? Because if you go to Gaza, if you go to the West Bank, if you go to Israel, people have died. People have continued to die. What lives did you save?
Well, it's like when I say, first of all, I don't claim that I did save lives. It was...
but you say joining Shin Bet was part of trying to save lives. And I'm saying to you, what lives then were saved?
It was a team effort. It was more than
But that team effort failed.
Well, we did our best, of our best ability on daily basis. And whenever we had information about suicide bomber, we stopped them. When we knew about the location of a mastermind behind suicide bombing attacks that was responsible for, killing innocent people, we stopped them, we arrested them. And we did our best. I'm sure that, we failed several times, maybe many times. Give me one perfect country that can face this kind of brutal enemy without making a mistake.
Palestinians have always said, ever since you released your book, that all you are interested in is becoming part of a campaign to discredit their cause. That all you're doing is part of the ongoing psychological warfare against them.
Well, I am an individual. For example, today, as a thinker, as author, I don't take my ideas from anybody. I have a long experience in that region. I'm a son of that region. And I understand the dynamics of politics and the invisible forces of people's lives in the region. And based on that, I act. I don't act based on what I am told. Nobody tell me what to do. We are on the same page with the Israeli government because I believe in democracy. I am on the same page with the Israeli government because it's the only true democracy in the Middle East that respects human rights and personal freedoms. Let's not forget that we have more than 1.2 million Palestinians, Muslims and Christians, who hold Israeli citizenships and live in Israel as any Israeli. They benefit from the government, and at the same time, they're not required to serve at the army. This is the only country maybe in the world that you can have a situation like this.
Your father issued a statement after you released the book disowning you. How does it make you feel?
Well, that was very hard,
But you should have expected it.
Actually, I did expect that. And I knew that he could not face the shame that I brought on the family. And he could not stay affiliated with my position from his God, from his political agendas, and the entire nation's agendas. And for that, I was disowned. It's very sad. But this is another example, that whenever somebody tried to take a stand for anything, all you face is intimidation, fear, disowning, and all these kind of things. And for me, I stand for what I believe. At least let's say this is my perception of the truth. I never claimed that I know the truth all the way.
In fact, talking about the truth, your brother actually issued a statement afterwards saying that the book is a lie.
Well, it's my brother had no idea what was going on for many years. And he made that statement before he read the book. I hope and I wish that he got the chance to read the book, and I hope that this book will open the eyes of many Palestinian young men to fight for their freedoms in the right direction, not in the wrong direction.
What do you think about the occupation today?
I think the biggest loser from this situation in the Middle East is Israel itself. Because Palestinians, unfortunately, they never look at ourselves, let's say, in the mirror to take responsibility. It's much easier for us to export and blame all our social, economical, even like our marriage problems on Israel. And I think we need to mature. We need to grow up and stop doing that. Palestinians are the most educated nation. They have the best technology in the region. Why? Because of Israel. Israel has no problem with Palestinians becoming an amazing nation. But as long as extremists and terrorists keep on attempting to hurt the state of Israel, this very small spot on the map in the Middle East, Israel is not going to tolerate that. And Israel sent messages.
In other words, to say that the occupation is justified?
I'm not saying that justified. First of all, we need to define the term occupation. What do you really mean by saying occupation?
Well, currently, Israeli military, they've got checkpoints all across the West Bank. There's a siege in Gaza and so on. Isn't that the occupation?
Well, this is not the occupation. This is just a recent situation happened after the second Palestinian Intifada. The Palestinian case has been open for the last 6 decades. And I remember for the first 15 years of my life, we did not have to go through any checkpoints. I remember my father, as a Muslim Brotherhood leader at that time, and even a new Hamas leader, we used to go to Israel. We used to go to their restaurants, to their zoos, to their institutions, and we were welcomed all the time. We never had to go through a checkpoint. But after the first and second Palestinian Intifada, and tens of suicide bombers who tried to go and kill Israelis, thousands of people were killed. Let's not forget that. And this is like one of the most brutal wars like terrorists carried against a democratic country. Let's put Israel on the side right now. We're talking about a really difficult situation, and you've been there on the ground. So now the original problem is not the checkpoints.
It isn't, but it could also be the millions of Palestinians that are even today are living in refugee camps in Jordan, that are living in refugee camps all over the world. It could be millions that have absolutely no home that they call their own.
Yeah, well, it's like we need to understand why those refugees, from the first place, left their places.
In 1948?
Yeah. What was the reason? Was it because Israel was killing everybody? This is the Palestinian wisdom on the Palestinian street.
Sure, but there's a historical element to this. There's a historical element to this, and we can spend time going back to 1948, what did the British do, who was supposed to do what, or we can say what then becomes the solution now. Is the route that you took the solution, or the solution would have been to, I don't know, maybe get people to sit all across the table?
Well, please to understand that I'm not inviting everybody to follow my steps and go work for intelligence services. That's not the point. The point is to help the new generation to think for themselves. As of this point, they have been conditioned by ideologies, politics, and propaganda. And I think this is the time. If I can show them an example, the example is to fight for our freedoms, to think for ourselves. And if we can reach that level, then Israel is not going to be our problem, because we will start to see the situation in different lenses. I tell you, Palestinians consider Israel as the enemy. And I tell Palestinians, follow the lead of Israel. Learn from the Israeli experience. After the Holocaust, the Jewish nation did not choose to take revenge. The Jewish nation decided to build its state. If Palestinians for 60 years tried to destroy the state of Israel, not to build a Palestinian state. And I think this is the fundamental problem.
From here, then, what do you think is going to happen in that region? I think, broadly speaking, not a personal thing, but just broadly for the region, what needs to happen?
What we are witnessing now in the Middle East, what's so-called spring, I believe that this is not the right revolution. This is a very important step. I'm very happy to see people that they can come down to the streets and bring a regime down if they will. But at the same time, I'm afraid that their problem is not with political systems or regimes. Their problem is with the religious authorities that have the higher or the upper hand on their lives.
All
And
right.
I believe we need a true revolution to separate religion from state and to bring a civil constitution that will protect people's freedoms.